Welcome to another episode of Boots on the Ground. This is a podcast about real estate, private credit, and a lot of other things. Today, we're going to be focused on the other things as we dive into geopolitics with our guest, General Chris Cavoli. Chris Cavoli spent 38 years as a U.S. Army officer, retired as a four-star general, serving as the 20th Supreme Allied Commander, a post first held by five-star General Eisenhower. And then he became the 19th commander of U.S. European Command from 2022 to 2025. He took command just 5 months after Russia's full-scale invasion of the Ukraine, and he ran U.S. operations across more than 50 countries while commanding all NATO forces. He's a trained foreign affairs officer specializing in Russian affairs. He speaks Russian, Italian, French, has degrees from Princeton, Yale, and this is the rare guest who has both read Russian military doctrine in Russian, and then he's commanded forces and arrayed them against it. Since then, he's joined Valor Equity Partners as a partner in 2025, the operational growth firm founded by Antonio Gracias, known for early bets on SpaceX, Tesla, Anduril. General Cavoli also sits on the Atlantic Council Board, and since January 2026, chairs its Reimagining European Defense and Innovation Task Force, focused on transatlantic defense industrial capacity and procurement reform. Thank you so much, General Cavoli, for coming on this podcast.
Now I'm tired.
Yeah, seriously. What you don't know, though, is that I know our guest is Colonel Cavoli. I was infantry company XO, and at one point briefly a company commander in Afghanistan under Colonel Cavoli, where from 2006 to 7, you led, I think, what is known to be one of the most informative operations on how we fight counterinsurgencies in remote areas. And I'll talk a little bit more about that to begin with. But I remember coming from a deployment with our battalion before in Iraq and being told, okay, we're going to have this operation that we do, Operation Mountain Lion, where we're going to go up into the mountains, the Hindu Kush and Kunar, and we're going to move it to an area that had previously only been, I wouldn't say secured is the right area, but there had only been some Marine forces and some special operation forces that occasionally went in there. But we were going to move in there where the bad guys were, and we were going to kick out the bad guys. And I remember thinking, okay, we should do this. This operation will probably last a few days. And we ended up going in the mountains and then staying there for, over a year, which was an incredible experience.
16 months, yeah.
16 months.
A long, long camp out.
And so some funny stories I have from that, but I'll tell one was I remember there was one lieutenant who we both know, and he tells the story, and it's perfect. Where there was I think maybe there was a firefight that he was in or needed to figure out which direction to go or what to do. And you were with him, and he's trying to make a decision, and you look at him and you say, Lieutenant, Occam's razor. And he's thinking, what the heck is Occam's razor? Oh, yeah. Occam's razor. And he eventually figured it out when you explain what Occam's razor is. Just pursue the most simple and easy solution. That's probably the right solution. But I think that sums up who you are. You're a man that I always saw reading, someone that I don't know if you ever even indulge in social media or movies or anything like that, but you consume massive amounts of information. You're a student of geopolitics, of the military, and so it's a real privilege to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Boots. It's a privilege to be here. Yeah, I'm very lucky to be able to reconnect with you after these years.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal.
And I am delighted to see your incredible success, too. It just makes me glow with happiness inside.
All I ever wanted to be was an Army general when I was a kid. So
all I ever wanted to do was run a real estate fund.
Yeah, right. No one wants that.
We should have talked about this.
No one wants that. I mean, and I couldn't believe too when I heard that you were made Supreme Allied Commander. I feel like that's a title for a Star Wars. The Supreme Allied Commander. But I know that General Eisenhower was the first one that took that position, and it was a 5-star billet. did you get to wear 5 stars?
No, you have 4 stars. Yeah.
You only wore 4, but it was a 5-star. I mean, General Eisenhower was a 5-star.
I think it was because General Eisenhower was a 5-star general already. Yeah.
Well, I still tell people that you're a 5-star.
Well, that's good. It's really unfortunate that the title, which is fantastic, does not work at home at all. Like when you get home, that title goes on the shelf. You don't get it until you walk out tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Well, it's tough to even have this interview because I don't know to call you Colonel Cavoli, which I know, or General Cavoli. I appreciate that you're allowing me to call you Chris.
I would want nothing else.
So, Chris, tell me about your transition to Valor Equity and what you're doing there.
Yeah. So, a couple of years before I retired, I could see the end of my career coming. Fortunately, I got to plan it, right? A lot of officers don't get that option. But a typical assignment as the Supreme Allied Commander lasts 3 years, I could see that date approaching. And, a friend of mine from undergraduate school, who's one of the partners, a co-president at Valor, we'd always stayed in touch over the years, and he'd come by the house, and when he was traveling through Europe, and would have dinner, and he would talk in just glowing terms about this partnership, this firm he was in, and it was intriguing. And then over time, through Juan, I got to know Antonio, and I got to know the other partners. And then, I don't know, maybe about a year before I retired, Juan started to get a little bit more specific. He says, "We think you should join us." And this was right at a point when my jobs were starting to reveal some significant challenges that we had in the defense industrial base, right? So I had 2 jobs. I was the commander of U.S. European Command on the one hand, so all the operations, plans, and forces that the U.S. Has to apply against the European problem set. And I was also the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. In the first job, I was primarily responsible for helping Ukraine, to include shipping them tons of ammunition and material. And I got to be able to see some of the challenges we had with inventories, not just in the U.S., but across the alliance. Some things went into shortage pretty quickly, like artillery ammunition. And our production rates were designed for peacetime, for a sustainment level, and simply we didn't have the capacity to generate the kind of volumes of equipment and munitions that a modern large-scale war demands. At the same time, I was in NATO, responsible for the rejuvenation and the reestablishment of the alliance's ability to fight at large scale. After the Cold War, we had focused on small out-of-area operations like the Balkan peacekeeping missions, Afghanistan. And now as we looked at how do we redevelop the ability to protect the territory of this entire alliance, we needed to rebuild a whole lot of organizations, build new units. We needed more equipment. We needed more munitions. So these 2 things were additive. The 2 problems that my jobs were revealing were additive. And I realized that the big strategic project for the West, for the U.S. and its key allies, was really going to be, for the next decade, reestablishing the ability to produce large volumes of weapons and equipment, and the ability to innovate on the battlefield like we saw happening in Ukraine, and to absorb new technologies quickly. And I couldn't think of a better way to do that than to try to apply private capital to the problem. And I'm getting the opportunity to work on that among many other things at Valor.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I was part of your success because I remember when you were a colonel and we were going to Afghanistan, and you come out of Ranger Battalion, and then you did some time, as a FAO, but you were all kinetic tactics, and now you're really focused on supply chain logistics, which I remember being asked to, when we went up to the mountains, thinking this is a short, stint. You've got in Afghanistan, I think over 700 people you're responsible for. I think roughly half of those were in the mountains. And, going up with my unit and being told at the time by the Battalion XO and the S4, hey, you've got to supply all, ammunition, food, water, to these people, to our troops in the mountains. And you get no helicopters, You get no trucks. You get no units. Just figure it out, Captain Dunlap. And we ended up, as a result, leveraging jingle trucks. I remember traveling in jingle trucks and taking donkey trains and mules. But what I learned to appreciate is that the logistics behind running a great operation, the resourcing,
Absolutely.
The equipment that you have, it is super complex. And I think at that time, the government was trying to figure out how to do it, and we weren't doing a great job of it. I think our technology lagged the private sector by, like, in some respects, maybe like 15 years. It felt like that. Now it feels like things have changed a lot, and I think it's probably by guys like Antonio and Valor Equity that have expedited some of these firms like Anduril and SpaceX and kind of helped integrate them into Department of Defense. But I'm really excited that you're doing this. I couldn't think of someone better to be doing this.
Yeah, so Valor historically has not shied away from defense and the defense tech investments, national security investments, right? Very early in SpaceX, Anduril, some of the other companies that you noted. And it's a core part of the firm's identity to help founders build companies that matter to the world, that are good for America, good for our allies. So it's not surprising that we've been involved in this space for a while. It's not the only space we're involved in, but it is an important space right now, and I'm very excited to be part of it. Your comments about logistics, obviously, Boots, are spot on, right? I mean, when you're a junior officer, you're just applying the guns to the problem, and life is very kinetic. But as you go farther along, it starts to reverse until Eisenhower, as an example. When Eisenhower wanted Montgomery to go faster and Patton to go slower, he didn't give them the command. He just restricted the amount of gas that Patton got, right?
Okay, there you go.
So the levers that you have really to run massive operations at a continental scale, most of them are really logistical.
I didn't know Eisenhower did that. I wish he would have.
Well, it was
wish
pretty controversial. Patton didn't like
it much. Let Patton take all of Berlin. So I think this is interesting because when we were in, you were still in, but when I was in with you, this is 2006 and 2007, the tech industry thought of defense and supporting combat operations as kind of tobacco. It was very much like something that we're not going to do. I remember, the U.S. had to work. I think they had to. A lot had to be done with Apple in order to get access into phones, in order to go after terrorists. It seems like things have shifted in like a 180, and now Silicon Valley is very much in support of helping our war fighters and America's missions.
Very much so. So in the tech industry, famously, we went from having employee protests against being involved in any sort of defense or defense-related activity to now seeing people being very enthusiastic. I mean, I was up at Harvard and MIT a couple of weeks ago, where there's a small consortium that functions kind of as an incubator, kind of as a conceptual incubator for young defense-oriented technology firms, mainly being put together by undergrads or graduate students. It's just fantastic, the amount of participation, the amount of enthusiasm for it. I think it's tied somewhat to a sense of service that I think the youth coming out of college has right now, that we haven't always had over the last 30 years. So I'm very encouraged by things like that. Comes from a very good place. And then I think just as a personal endeavor, these are sticky problems. These are hard things, right? These are difficult engineering problems. They're difficult conceptual problems, and it's exciting for young people to get to help solve them. But the ecosystem of founders is vibrant in the U.S. and it's real, and I think we have in many ways overcome some of that stigma. Interestingly, Boots, the stigma wasn't limited to Silicon Valley or something, right? Governments in Europe had strict prohibitions against investing in defense, investing in arms manufacturers. Pension funds weren't allowed to do it and things like that. Mark Rutte on occasion would observe to me, when I was prime minister, the three things you couldn't invest in were tobacco, pornography, and defense. I'd say thanks, Mark. Thanks for putting me in good company there. But I think that's mainly in our past. The EU has, in the past year, reduced its restrictions on the way countries can invest in defense. For example, environmental considerations used to dominate many investment decisions. Now those are not applied to questions of defense investment. So there are some loosening up that we're starting to see, and a large number of institutional investors in Europe are becoming more able to get into this, which is important, of course, because the capital markets in Europe are nothing like the capital markets here, and companies have a little harder time getting out of the gates and then sustaining themselves until they become viable and positive revenue producing. Yeah.
And what caused the change? You think it was the war in Ukraine?
Absolutely.
Or you think it was before that?
100%. Yeah.
It feels like maybe when we started to distance ourselves from China over COVID, there began like a more obvious realignment of powers.
Yeah.
And before Ukraine, it seemed as though there was an axis of power that was starting to form. It is concerning, and I'd love to get your thoughts on, defense spending. I mean, maybe we're a little bit biased, but part of me worries that this may be a self-fulfilling prophecy, where we now have defense spending. It's $3 trillion. This is, this is more than it's ever been in the history of the world, I believe. Certainly in recent history. In some cases, that's really good because we want our allies to be strong. But I'm curious where you think this is all headed.
Yeah. So, just like any major expenditure program that a government can engage in, it can have an ultimately positive or negative effect depending on the policies that undergird it. Right. So the weapons won't cause the war, the policies will cause the war. So these things don't have to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. But there is a tendency, for arms races to start and for them to kind of run away with their own sort of a pattern of logic. I think those things are best constrained by having good networks of nations working on the same problem together, because then you distribute the policy making a little bit, and that always constrains you a little bit more. So I think it's very positive that a huge amount of the defense expenditure you were just citing, probably $2 trillion of the $3 trillion, is planned inside the NATO alliance, which I think is going to be ultimately a very responsible way to build forces back to a level where they can sustain credible deterrence and, if necessary, defeat an adversary without creating self-fulfilling prophecies like you commented about. I think we're well on the way to doing that, and I think it's going to be ultimately a very positive thing. But as always, strong political judgment is desired in all things.
So you said it, and I don't know exactly where I got this, but the importance and urgency of reaffirming the alliance, rearming the alliance, cannot be overstated.
No.
Why is that?
Yeah, because of the amount we built down after the Cold War. So during the Cold War, we were driven by a set of plans. We knew the Soviet Union's plans, and we had plans to counter them. It was called the GDP, the General Defense Plan. So that General Defense Plan, the GDP, drove everything inside the alliance. It drove our readiness levels. It drove the sorts of forces we needed. It drove the way we exercised. It drove our command and control arrangements. At the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union fell apart, and we no longer needed that plan. That plan was no longer a useful plan. So it became defunct. And for 35 years, we didn't have plans in NATO, standing plans, except for a couple of contingency plans. We instead, by mutual consent, focused on out-of-area operation, these smaller operations that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the Balkans, Afghanistan, everything. And these are operations that could be characterized by a smaller size. They were usually far away, out of area. They were done on our initiative with a non-peer adversary. And so there was a huge amount of optionality baked in for us, right? So we could deploy on a schedule, and that's really useful. We didn't have to have all the forces above the brigade level because we're operating at smaller levels. We could commercialize most of our logistical systems and use contractors instead. And these provided great opportunities for economies. And so we all started to take economies and harvest them. And this was the famous peace dividend, right? So if you're generating forces on a cyclical basis to send to Afghanistan, usually you have one employed, one getting ready, and one recovering. The only one out of the three that really needs to be ready is the one in the fight. Wow, so you can save massive amounts on readiness. If you are going to fight at the brigade level and below, you no longer need things like a core artillery brigade. You no longer need functional headquarters at the higher levels. You don't need fancy logistics, expensive militarized logistics systems if you're just going to hire commercial contractors to bring stuff in.
Yep.
So we optimized our forces, the U.S. forces included, for that sort of warfare. It's literally the opposite of what we need to fight large-scale conventional operations. So when 2022 came along, we suddenly saw a real large-scale war in Europe again.
Yeah.
And the heads of state and government of NATO got together in Madrid in June of 22 and directed my predecessor, Todd Walters, immediately to develop and implement a strategy to defend the territory of the alliance. So don't worry about out-of-area operations. Show me how to defend the alliance again. I took command 5 days later, and my job became the story of rewriting plans to do that. We wrote classical war plans that describe how we're going to defend specific parts of the geography of the alliance. And that spawned a bunch of other things, Boots, right? The first thing, if I give you a plan, I have to tell you what forces I need to execute it. So we had all of a sudden a force structure requirement that was militarily sound, objective, and plans-based for the first time since 1989. First time in 35 years we had a plans-based force structure requirement. This is the shopping list for the famous 2%. Unfortunately, according to my math, it was more like 3.7% of GDP across, of our collective GDP for 10 years. And so that's where the 5% comes from. 3.5% for core defense planning spending. That's really to build the forces that are needed for these plans. All the other stuff, training, logistics, all of the infrastructure that you need, that's the 1.5% add-on. It's a little less well-defined.
Yeah.
Some people will probably try to jam some things in there, but it's also a necessary part of defense spending. And so now it's just a matter of us all doing it, right? And that's what this summit a couple of days ago in Ankara was all about. It was, we've all agreed on the plans, we've all agreed on the approach, we've all agreed on the forces we need to build. Every country has volunteered to build specific forces. Now let's get on with it. And a large part of that is about invigorating the defense industrial base on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah, I think in 1988 we had this doctrine we were fighting the Russians.
Right.
And then we pivoted because we were in this unipolar world, so the only people we had to worry about were insurgents. And so we could hire KBR or Blackwater contractors to like do part of it, do the 1.5% or whatever,
Right.
a lot of the resilience piece. And now the interesting thing is you went back, you build a doctrine which was for fighting the Russians, but I think now we've seen that even change where we realize in Ukraine, it is a new doctrine where it's about building the cheapest drones and missiles and counter drones. It's totally different. So it's not even the conventional, let's ramp back up to the old conventional military plans we had where we have tanks on the battlefield.
Right.
Now it's entirely new technology, probably humanoids. I'm curious, like, what does this new battle plan look like for the future?
So, I think the big shift, the main thing that we see in the war in Ukraine is all about scale. Just scale. The quantities of munitions being consumed, the number of lives being expended, the number of vehicles, the scale is just not what we had been thinking about for the last 35 years. Russia has lost more than 4,000 main battle tanks during this war. 4,000. So to give a sense of scale, the UK has about 200 main battle tanks and is building down to about 150. France has an operational fleet of about 220. Russia's lost 4,000 tanks. Russia's lost multiples of major allies' entire inventory. Canada has 74 tanks. And they've replaced those tanks. Mm-hmm. So the war production and the consumption of materiel is just such a massive part of a large-scale war that it brings us back to think about World War II and the way we won World War II, right? There's a strong argument to be made that our military skill was just fine, but our industrial skill was fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that that's a large function of the large factor in our winning World War II. So, we end up back in this place where scale and numbers are a critical part of warfare. That is not what we've been planning for. During 35 years of out-of-area operations, non-peer adversaries, like you pointed out a minute ago, we unbalanced our force, right? For example, we weren't fighting people who had air forces, so we got rid of our ground-based air defense. I mean, we literally, in the U.S. Army, got rid of all of our ground-based short-range air defense.
I remember the ADA platoon got turned into, I don't know, it went away. It came out of the
bingo.
It was funny. In what was the Avenger or whatever?
Avenger, yeah.
Driving those around a glass box in Iraq that doesn't provide any protection but has great FLIR capability. It's changed. I'm curious. Should we even be building tanks? Isn't it all what you're investing in, like Anduril?
Yeah.
Isn't like there's no more battleships and tanks?
So during,
now it's
this
manless.
period without a peer, right?
Yeah.
We did a couple of things. One thing we did was the stuff that we believed that we would win fights short and fast up front. And so we optimized our weaponry for that. And, generals asked for more and more capable weaponry. We asked for really exquisite stuff, and industry generated it. And we have that stuff now. We have fantastic weapons, B-2 bombers, things like that. But they're extremely hard to make, so they cost a lot of money. And they take a long time to build, and therefore we don't have a lot of them in the inventory. And then if you get into a fight that you don't win right up front, you get into a sustained fight like Ukraine's in, then all of a sudden you discover you need deeper magazine depth, you need more inventory, but you can't build it at the time of need because you designed weapons that are such complicated devices that they can't be built quickly. And so our weapons design philosophy became something that gave us great capability but not great capacity. Now we see that we need to add capacity. So there really needs to be a part of our military that can do what our B-2 bombers did in Operation Midnight Hammer in Iran last year. But we also need the ability to have affordable mass, and that's been missing in our arsenal. And that's exactly the sort of stuff that companies are able to make in the defense tech world. Right? A little hard for a startup with 5 guys to start building a B-2 bomber tonight, but they sure can develop some creative ways to create affordable mass, and that's been a very successful thing. So I think what we'll end up with is a military that has a certain part of it that is very highly modernized, and then the vast bulk of it is going to be legacy equipment that is augmented by technology that amplifies its effect. And that's what most militaries in history look like. I think it's going to be the group that's able to do the best amplification of the effects of its legacy systems by adding technologies to them and by building complementary systems that is really going to be able to stay ahead for the future.
Okay, so we're still going to have tanks, but we're going to add adapt to them? Put technologies around them, or
it's really hard in history to find a silver bullet weapon, right? To find a weapon that just changes everything. The most recent one was the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
So really what you tend to have is incremental change, sometimes greater incremental change than others, but usually incremental change. And I think it's important always to go back to what is the warfighting requirement, not as what is the capability, right? So a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine, a retired 3-star named Eric Wesley, very, very profound thinker, wrote a great article about the drone, and he said that the drone is like the machine gun in World War I. It changed everything until a countermeasure was found for it. Then as soon as the Brits found the tank, maneuver warfare returned. The problem with drone-to-drone warfare, for example, is that it's basically air-to-ground war, which doesn't produce decisive results, right? You can't conquer a country that way. You can't produce decision. And in fact, what we see is a very indecisive fight in Ukraine. Very lethal, but very non-decisive. So Eric wrote that drones have made ground maneuver difficult, but they have not made it unnecessary, and that distinction is important. So I think what we'll do is we'll discover that there's got to be a way to move forward with firepower and protection to take over pieces of key ground or to control populations. It may be a tank, it might not be a tank. Right now it's a tank, but it's going to have to operate in different fashion with different additional technologies to be able to defeat the current threat against it, which is the drone. And then after those become a non-issue, there'll be another one that comes up.
So you talked about the scale, the silver bullet with the atomic weapon. I don't think I had realized the toll and the scale of this war. Human-wise, 600,000 people have died. I think 450,000, these are rough numbers, were Russian, which is incredible. It's more than twice of the Ukrainian losses. So the Ukrainians have been enormously successful. And there was a real hesitancy from the U.S. to get more involved because Putin was threatening using a nuclear bomb. Back to the silver bullet. Russian. You've been studying Putin for a long time. Where do you think this goes? Like, will he ever give up? What does he want? Did you have any thoughts on the mind of Putin?
Yeah, so very dangerous business to try to climb and slide Putin's head, right? Yeah. But it's also necessary business. You got to try to have some insights. Overall, I think it's pretty clear that Putin wants to reestablish Russian greatness, right? He wants Russia to be taken as a serious player on the world stage, a world power that can dominate its specific part of the globe and is essentially and inevitably consulted on any matters of global importance. That's what he wants.
Does that include reassembling the USSR?
Well, it includes a bunch of things, but what it includes can be flexible, right? So there's always this question, is Putin a strategist or is he a tactician? And I would say he understands his strategic goal, but he accomplishes it mainly by making opportunistic tactical choices and hoping that they pile up to something that gets him to his strategic goal. In the short term, a necessary part of it is to subjugate Ukraine, to deny Ukraine's existence as an independent nation, to describe them.
You don't think there's ever a peace deal with the Donbass or a portion? He wants all.
Absolutely. He wants Ukraine to be governmentally controlled by Moscow, and he wants the people of Ukraine to understand themselves as a subset of a greater Russian nation, not as an independent nation. And this is an important part of this sort of what's become an increasingly messianic approach to the future of Russia that Putin has had, right? So as he's looking at restoring Russian greatness, it's become a grander and grander concept. And that makes it more and more dangerous. So the current project in this reestablishment of the Russian project is Ukraine, but it will go beyond that. And I think he'll start by trying to reassert control or dominance over what used to be the Soviet Union, and then slowly but surely reassembling that. It goes along well with the very realistic geopolitical approach to the world, in which he looks at geographic choke points that have historically, been a very important part of warfare in Europe. Russia has historically lacked really defined barrier borders like big rivers, mountain ranges, and things like that. You've got big wide open corridors like the Smolensk-Brest Gate, right, that goes down through Central Europe. It's a highway that goes both ways for armies throughout history. I think he'll reassemble things in a way that combines political outcomes with militarily advantageous geography. That's what he'll try to do.
Well, after the recent NATO summit, the Allies pledged $70 billion in military spending, $50 billion in new procurements for deep precision strike, which is deep into Russian territory, integrated air defense missiles, uncrewed systems, $72 billion in investment into modernized fuel storage and pipeline infrastructure. Looks as though the Allies are becoming more overt in their support of Ukraine, and even firing missiles. It looks like now they have drones going 1,800 miles into Russia past the Ural Mountains, which historically that was you were safe behind the Ural Mountains. Where does this go? Is there any risk that you see in Putin using a nuclear weapon?
I am not one of the people who thinks that is an imminent risk. I think that President Putin has effectively used nuclear saber rattling to scare us off of specific policies from time to time. It's become less useful to him over time. As the more countries have heard it, the more they've realized that it's probably not going to happen. We've seen very few, even at the times of the greatest saber rattling, we've seen very few practical moves to actually deploy or employ nuclear weapons. We watch things like that very closely, I'm sure you'd imagine. It was hard in the beginning. So during the Cold War, we had very well-developed theories of deterrence and escalation management. We had the works of Waldstetter and Kahn and guys like that we studied professionally. We had arms control frameworks. We had standing consultative bodies. We had hotlines going back and forth, and we had an entire vocabulary of things that you say and signals that you give so that we could signal to each other our intent.
Yeah.
It was really, pretty amazing. Along with all the other things that went away after the Cold War, we lost our dexterity with all of those questions of nuclear signaling and deterrence theory and stuff like that. And in many ways, we had to relearn them both at the military level and the political level as we went forward. So originally, in the beginning in 22 and 23, I think we were a lot more tentative because of that. But then as we reestablished our confidence in managing deterrence and managing escalation, I think we began to go farther. I mean, remember, there was a period in 2022 when the big question was, my gosh, if we give HIMARS to the Ukrainians, are the Russians going to go nuclear? Mm-hmm. That seems like a quaint notion at this point. So I do not think we're in danger in that way. I think the Russians have been very careful to maintain strategic nuclear stability with us, precisely because they don't want a theater nuclear option to be executed.
Okay. Moving to Iran. It seems like we're in a sticky situation. What if you were advising the president at this point, or America, or the allies? What's the best course of action?
Well, You know, that's a tough one to answer publicly, Boots, because there's an admiral named Brad Cooper who has exactly the job at Central Command that I had at European Command, and he probably doesn't need a retired guy to give him too much public advice.
Okay. Well, what are we not seeing then? Help inform the public then on what U.S. forces are facing, or how this changes government spending on defense.
Yes.
Where does this go?
So some of the same themes come up, right? Some of the same themes come up. Immediately, we see the same cost exchange ratio problem in Iran that we saw in Ukraine. So the essential problem in Ukraine was it was pretty inexpensive for the Russians to start copying Shahed drones and sending them into Ukraine. And the only thing Ukraine had to defend itself with was the extremely expensive, exquisite weapons that the West gave them to do it with. And so you get the famous $2 million Patriot missile to shoot down a $20,000 drone, right? The Ukrainians did a lot to accommodate that, to adjust for that. They developed machine gun teams on the back of pickup trucks that could shoot down the slower drones and things like that. But all those problems resurfaced with the war in Iran, right?
Yep.
Where they were sending low, slow Shaheds over, and we had not taken the last 4 years of watching it happen in Ukraine to build ourselves the systems necessary to shoot that down. So we ended up on the wrong side of the cost exchange ratio. Now, there's been a whole lot done in the past couple of months to fix that on the ground, and our allies in the Gulf have worked really hard on that as well. But that's the first thing you see. You see that it's very easy to get the other side to deplete its arsenal of extremely expensive, hard to build, hard to replace equipment and munitions easily. And we haven't solved that problem quite yet. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing I would say is geography drives everything in warfare, right? Geography drives everything in warfare. Choke points, strategic choke points, key terrain, things like that really shape who's winning and who's losing. And then finally, it is very, very hard to produce decisive results from the air alone. And we've tried it over and over in history, and I think there's one example in history, Japan in 1945, where air power alone produced a strategic result.
Yep. Well, it appears as though the Iranians are very difficult, irrational individuals when it comes to trying to negotiate anything. So I'm very worried about where this goes, and I'm also worried about Russia. I just feel as though what I've read, the Russian Slavic mentality, or at least Putin, is probably not one that's going to give in or give up easily.
Hey, Boots, one thing, not to parse words or split hairs or something, but I wouldn't use the word irrational. I tend to use the word non-rational. I believe most countries have a non-rational aspect to their decision making that is difficult to be understood from the outside. The Russians certainly have a non-rational component to their decision making. You can certainly argue that we do. And if the Iranian leadership were completely irrational, they wouldn't have managed to stay in charge for so long. They wouldn't have managed to have a functioning country, as problematic as it is. But there's a non-rational component to their decision making that is very hard for us to account for in our decision making, because we tend to mirror image. All countries tend to mirror image, and we just have a blind spot where they have a definite tendency. And this is happening in Iran. It's happening. It happens with Russia all the time. We just don't understand the motivation or why they would have made that decision. It doesn't make sense to us.
Well, that's kind. I don't know if I really understand the difference between non-rational and irrational, but it seems as though there's not a lot of concern for their own people, doing what one would think would be best for a country. But I am curious. I mean, what is their motivation? I mean, what do they expect to get out of this?
It's classic. One important part of their motivation is they are a deeply religious regime. You may not agree with their interpretation of their religion. You may not agree with the results that it produces and everything, but they're deeply religious. So that is what I mean by a non-rational component in their decision making, right? It's not based on logic. It's based on faith, based on belief, and it's different from being irrational, which means incapable of using logic. It's just a part of their decision making that affects their logical decision making that's hard for us to understand, and it's genuinely hard for a country as historically secular as the United States to understand the motivations of a theocracy, right? Especially a radical theocracy. So I think we'll have to go through this a little farther with them before we get to a result that's good for us.
I mean, we've been able to cut deals with the Taliban and with other groups. I mean, it seems as though they are more non-rational, to use your word, than any group we've ever fought or encountered. So something that's interesting that I found was PitchBook in first quarter of 2026 showed that almost $20 billion has been invested across 262 defense tech deals, and whereas just 2-3 years ago that was roughly $5 billion, which was a big number back then. So it is exciting. You're seeing a lot of capital moving into these companies that you guys are investing in. And I'm curious, as you're looking at defense and resilience companies, what are you looking for as an investor?
Yeah. Well, the basics always start with a founder and a team that has a vision and has the competencies necessary to execute that vision, has the commitment to it, and the stick-to-itiveness to do it. So the first step is the leadership of the company. The second thing, they've got to have a product that fits with the market that we can identify and see. We really focus on the growth stage, right? Valor's well known for helping its portfolio companies grow. We have probably about a third of our employees are not involved with investments at all, but are rather a part of what we call our scale group. It's a group of engineers, production specialists, revenue generation specialists who will go, and after we've developed a certain degree of conviction in a company, we will go and agree with the leadership of that company to help them with the particular problem they're having and scaling up. We have some guys who've scaled up, a dozen companies because that's the only part they focus in. So we look for the opportunities where we can help the company, where we think the company would uniquely benefit from Valor. We try very hard to make sure that we've got a fit with the company because we consider these to be long-term relationships. We develop them fairly slowly. We develop them deliberately. We tend to invest a little bit at first until we generate conviction and until we know the founder has conviction in our assistance and has faith in us and trust, and then we'll concentrate on that position and develop it. So yeah, it's a really interesting time in national security investing, though. You've got a couple of significant trends. One of them is the valuations you were pointing out a minute ago. In the U.S., they're pretty high. Not necessarily that high yet in Europe. They're probably a couple of years behind us in that regard. Little less expensive in Canada too. But there's a valuation question that's floating out there. Since we focus on the growth stage, we tend to believe that execution is the most important thing, not fundraising. They don't always go hand in glove, and sometimes they get out of whack with one another. That's an important thing to help companies, avoid. And then the other big trend is the direct involvement of the U.S. government in a number of deals, which is something we haven't really experienced in the defense sphere, at least in the innovation sphere in defense in a couple of decades.
Your experience in the Army as a leader, I feel like that is a great asset for Valor. to have you go and evaluate leaders and their ability to execute on their missions. Some of the, my research, Edelman Trust Barometer has it evaluates trust in leaders, and we're at a high right now where trust in leadership has fallen amongst political leaders, business leaders. The one place where trust is still very high amongst leaders is the military. So I think it's great that you have that experience, and you're hopefully able to leverage it at Valor Equity in terms of being able to evaluate leaders and teams. What do you look for in terms of if you're trying to evaluate an entrepreneur as a leader or their ability to execute based on your military experience, what you've seen? What are you looking for?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is to make sure that the leader has his or her values right. And those values shouldn't just be coherent and consistent in that individual. For us as an investment, we would like them to be aligned with ours. So our cultural values are really the first thing that attracted me to Valor, if you want to know the truth, right? Excellence, integrity, but then critically responsibility and humility. Those two really I hadn't seen too much in other companies' descriptions of themselves, and I found them to be very important. And I discovered when I started to get to know Valor better, they're real. The idea of humility and responsibility are really important. So we look for balanced leaders like that when we're looking for a company. I personally fall back on some military stuff. There's always been this question in the military, what makes a great combat leader? And there's always been studies, there are books, the great captains of history and stuff. Marshall.
It's APFT scores, right?
Yeah, it's exactly, right. Shiny boots. George Marshall, during the Second War, commissioned a study also about division commanders. Who were the great division commanders, and what did they have in common? They couldn't figure it out. Some of them did have great PT scores, some didn't. But two traits were universally possessed by all of the highly rated combat division commanders. One of them is energy, and the other is optimism. It's just hard work, and I would say founding a company is damned hard work. You just have to have buckets of energy. If you don't have it, you got to find it, right? There's got to be energy, and it's got to be contagious energy, and then you got to have optimism, right? I mean, how many times in your time in combat did it occur to you that this might not work out for me? But it's the optimism, it's the belief that this is going to work out, and the other guy is more worried than I am, that allows you to conquer problems and allows you to impose your will. And so energy and optimism are two things that I look for when I'm looking for leaders as well.
I think those are great. Yeah, I mean, you've got to always be optimistic in business, because like combat, it's hard. You're going from very difficult missions in combat, but it is also extraordinarily difficult to grow a small company, particularly I think in the defense sector, because oftentimes you only have one buyer, and that's really hard with a lot of bureaucratic red tape. So.
And just like combat, you can go from moments of great elation to moments of deep concern in a blink of an eye, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it can change quickly. So we're getting to the fun portion of this. We'll get a little bit more light. This is called the Wheel of Gross Returns. I'll explain to the rules on it. There are no wrong answers on this, but we'll be doing some lightning round questions. And let me put this up here. I'll explain what these are. But we're going to go back and forth and spin this wheel. And this wheel, the reason why it's called gross returns is if it lands on what's termed gross returns, you have to then have a jelly belly. And these jelly bellies, there's two identical jelly bellies. One is a very normal, sweet jelly bean taste. The other is a disgusting taste. So I think what I'm looking at right now is like, maybe this one is like wet dog versus banana. So I'd stay away from that one. I've had it before. It's really, really bad.
Wow, can we get a wastebasket in here?
So, and then what I have is if it lands on one of the other colors, let's just go back. I've changed them for you because normally I have real estate ones, which I'm not going to make you answer real estate questions. The green is going to be a question around military. The purple is a question around leadership. The yellow is a question around investments. The magenta is a question around business. And then blue is culture. And I will let you take the first spin on gross returns. And I really hope we can get through this without landing on any gross returns.
If we hit like a green one, then you pick one of these 3 questions on the paper to ask me?
I will pick the questions to ask you. And we'll go back and forth. Then I'm going to spin and you can pick a question, okay?
Oh, wow, that's a better deal than I normally
Here's what we're
get.
going to do, too, is we're both going to answer the question, though. Because it's always interesting to hear the other person.
Let's just do that.
Oh, come on.
Come on.
There we go. Blue. Okay. So this is blue. I'm going to give you, which one do I want? Okay. American export. The rest of the world adopts one American tradition. Which one?
Entrepreneurialism with an understanding that failure is an essential part of growth rather than a mark of shame that closes off the rest of your career.
And you think that's uniquely American?
I think it's almost uniquely American. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is characteristically American, and I could go to many other countries that I know and love and show you a culture that does not have the same approach.
Interesting. Mine was the same thing. It was the American mentality, but it was a different one for me. I think Americans fight for freedom, and I think that's uniquely American. I think Americans fight for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, property rights, and I think more importantly, they do it for other people's freedom too. They care so much about that. I think all of our wars that we have, including the Civil War, was fighting for other people's freedom. And I can't think of too many other countries where they regularly go and fight for other people's freedom. So that is mine, this liberator superhero mentality that young men and women in America have. I think more of the world should have it.
I think you're right.
Okay. My turn. You ready?
Uh-oh. Who came up with this, by the way?
Look at this. I'm spinning too hard. I'm going to do another spin there because we're on blue too. Blue. We keep getting blue. Okay, you get to ask a question from culture.
History comes alive. Which historical event would you witness?
Okay, I think I would witness, because of the 250th, I've been thinking a lot about America, but the Second Continental Congress, when the signers of the Declaration of Independence signed that document knowing that it was treasonous, and a lot of their neighbors disagreed with them, and I just thought, I would love to know, for one, meet the men that were in that room, but also, how they made that decision. Like that was a scary, brave thing to do. And it's the 250th, so it seems appropriate. How about you?
I mean, there are so many things, especially, you'd want to be behind the scenes to see what really happened in that room or something.
Oh, yeah.
This is a great question. But out of all of history, I guess the one thing that I would not have wanted to miss, that I would want to be in person for, would be the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's a pretty important one. So, usually in these questions, you got to leave out Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
it's
I know, but
the one person you
it's
want
all
to
of
meet.
history.
I mean, that would be pretty amazing. It's certainly profound impact on the world. Okay, your turn.
All right.
Gosh, we're doing a good job avoiding the gross returns. Purple. Okay. I would say, actually, I think this is a good one. I think you're a phenomenal leader. I think we were really lucky to have you serving as long as we did in the military, and I'm really glad that you're going to be in private industry leading as well.
You're too kind.
This is the highest ROI. Which leadership habit has the highest ROI in your opinion?
Well, I already talked about the characteristics of energy and optimism, and not really a habit anyway, although a lot of it is learned. A lot of energy and a lot of optimism is a learned thing, so it might be a habit. But to give a different answer, which leadership habit has the highest ROI? Self-examination. self-examination. If you have a habit of constantly asking yourself if you got it right, asking others if you got it right, if you view all of your decisions with a degree of faith and skepticism at the same time, I think over time you develop better and better decision making. Self-examination.
Yeah, I never get to see you do self-examination, but I saw you as always a very energetic and optimistic leader, and I appreciate that.
An important part of leadership is not appearing to be confounded in front of your subordinates, even when you're confounded
Isn't that like lead through vulnerability? Isn't this the new Brene Brown leadership style? But what I did see you do, which I think is a really important aspect of a leader, is being a reader. You're a phenomenal reader. And I found that being, there's a quote, you can't be a leader without being a reader, but I think that's a big part of it.
That's a great one.
Okay, my turn. Gosh, we're getting lucky.
Oh, wow.
We're getting lucky. Okay, blew it. I think there's only one, number 2, that we haven't asked. You can go ahead and ask it of me.
Never again. This trend disappears forever. What should that trend be?
So I'm not a big fan of veteran swag. I think when you leave the service, you need to transition fully, and your identity can't always be being a veteran. I think it's unhealthy for moving forward. So I would say if we're getting rid of a trend, the fashion trend, which is veterans always wearing veteran swag, I don't think it's helpful for forming a really important new identity post-military life. How about you?
It's also not an important. It's also it detracts from the essential selflessness of the service that the person rendered, and that's the most noble part of that service.
Maybe that's part of it too. Yeah.
What trend do I want to see disappear forever? There are a number of musical trends I would put in there. There are a number of other trends, but a disinclination toward public service is a trend that I think should disappear forever, and I think it is kind of happening right now. I think we have a resurgence in interest in public service among our 18 to 25-year-old demographic, and I think it's a very important thing. But the trend that preceded it is something that I hope keeps receding into the distance.
When you say public service, I'm assuming you mean
military, government, and even charitable. Yeah.
Okay. So not necessarily being a politician, just working for those organizations.
Yeah, and even just the general sense that some things are just more important than me, and acting on it.
Yeah.
Right. Just a public and civic mindedness.
Yeah, selflessness. Okay, well that's good. I think it's my turn now.
I need to get it.
I need to fix this, man. Glue this sucker on. Try this one more time. Although I should have gone.
Gross return.
Okay. This is the fun part.
This is where the nasty jelly beans come in.
So I'm going to look at this, and I'm avoiding. Okay, I'm going to do. This looks like pomegranate or old bandage. Okay.
Pomegranate or old bandage.
Here we go. This is old bandage.
Is it good?
No, it's not good at all. It gets worse. Oh, it gets worse. Then you can taste like the old vine. It's actually like a latex old bandage. They do such a good job. These are just evil people that sit there and design these disgusting things so well. Okay. Ugh, that's bad. Your turn.
I'm certain to hit it now.
Oh, look
Green.
at you. Okay. What's one military tradition the business world should adopt?
I think the military says goodbye to people very well. whether they're moving on to their next job, or whether they're getting out of the service, or even at the end of their lives, right? We stop, we make a ceremony, we thank the person, we wish the person all the best, we put it into the context of our organization and the organization's arc through history. I think we say goodbye to people very well, and I think that does two things. I think that it reaffirms the culture of the organization, and it encourages those who aren't leaving that they're valued and that they will be sent off with the same respect someday.
In the Army, you don't I mean, you do that when someone, in the private sector, you get fired, oftentimes, or maybe you retire, or you take another job somewhere, which leaves a bitter taste. In the Army, it seems like there's not as much control over your decisions sometimes.
That's true.
But it is interesting because when you leave in the Army, for those that don't know, when you leave a command, you're often presented with a flag, a guidon of the unit which you commanded, or a really cool pistol, or that's engraved with your name on it, or something like that, which is really, really cool. I have read and sort of found that in business you should celebrate when people come on, but when they leave, it should be a sad day, not a happy day. I think that was maybe Reed Hastings, the Netflix No Rules. I think it was something along that, but I think I've done a bad job of that. We try to really celebrate on the front end, but that's a good one. Even
before the person hasn't done great stuff for the organization yet?
Well, if they're leaving the team, right? Of their own volition.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
They're leaving the team out of their own volition, or they're being fired.
Whereas in the military, you're going for
you're like, and you might run into them again.
Fair enough.
One thing that I liked is, and I think General McChrystal does this in the private sector, but he actually sets up a talk with the the U shape and all the screens, and has all of his people in there. And then in the military, we had, particularly in combat, the BUB, or the battle update, just like a daily brief. It's like, this is what we got accomplished, this is what's going on. But I think that was a great way of running or managing operations.
Yeah, it really baselines everybody. You can get a common set of understanding of what's going on, what needs to happen next. If there's any instruction that needs to be given for modification of operations and things, you get it immediately. Yeah, that's a really good one.
Okay. I believe it's your turn now.
You're holding on. Green.
Okay. Actually, was it my turn? I think you might have. I
can't remember.
Yeah, because I asked you the question.
If you lose track of turns, you have to eat one of the jelly beans.
Yeah. I think yes. Okay, I'll let you go. I think maybe I spent. So green is okay. You get one military leader from history on your team. Which military leader in history would you most want on your executive team?
Depends on what I was trying to do. So if I was trying to build an army to win a huge war, I would want George C. Marshall on my team. If I was trying to manage a fractious alliance that had a huge task in front of it, I would want Dwight D. Eisenhower on my team. If I were trying to win a firefight in the hills of Afghanistan, I would want Tommy Wilburn on my team.
Is he still around, Tom Wilburn?
Yeah, he is. I heard from him the other day.
He was a stud. I remember seeing that guy.
Incredible guy.
Working with him, and it just felt like I was with a legend.
If I were trying to establish a huge empire, I would want Alexander on my team. I'd want him in charge of my team. But if I were trying to govern a huge country for the first time, I would want Augustus on the team.
What if you're at Valor Equity and you get to add a partner to the team?
Oh no, I would not jump into that one. I think we've got great partners at Valor Equity. So I don't know how exactly it is that Antonio finds partners and attracts them to us, but he does a masterful job.
Well, I know the answer to that. I would choose you if I was at Valor Equity. You were the military leader. No, yeah, I mean, you would be for sure top of my list. I would definitely take you in any operation because of your relentless energy, optimism. You're incredibly smart. If I can't have you because it looks like a brown nose move, I really like Hal Moore. I think he demonstrated tremendous humility.
Yeah.
He seemed to really be there for soldiers. He was sort of one of the leaders that eat last sort of type of leader. He was smart. So I think I would take him.
That's a great one.
Okay. You spun, so I spin. You got it? No, come on.
You're
man.
good. You're good.
Yeah, okay. Here we go. This is Tutti Frutti or Stinky Socks. Come on, Tutti Frutti. Let's go.
You got Tutti Frutti?
Tutti Frutti. We're good. Okay, your turn.
It's a reflection of your virtue. Good.
Purple. Okay, here's one. Okay.
Wait.
I'll
What's the difference?
let you pick the purple.
What's the difference between purple and magenta?
Purple's the leadership one. But wait, no, that's magenta. Yeah, that's magenta. I'm sorry, business.
I don't know. I would not want to admit in public that I know what color magenta is.
Or admit that you were colorblind. That would be bad for your time in the Army. Okay, you go ahead and pick it.
Magenta?
Magenta business. What do you have to ask me?
Yeah, you've got one lunch reservation. Boots, which CEO do you invite to lunch?
Okay. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's a Catholic prayer app called Hallow. And I'm not Catholic, but I've used it. It's phenomenal. But the CEO is a guy named Alex Jones, which is an unfortunate name because Alex Jones was also the InfoWars sort of thing. But he has an amazing story of how he started the prayer app, and he's built an incredible culture. And it's like the perfect integration of faith. And he's spoken. I know there's a great venture capital group in Greenwich called Team Worthy. They're friends, and they made an investment, and I was able to talk to them and hear snippets about him and watch him speak. And he's one of the most gifted, I think, leaders out there. Really has built an incredible team app, and he has a very unique and different way of running a business. Almost like a ministry, which is, they say, the best businesses have missionaries, not mercenaries behind them. So really, really interesting. How about you? Who would you?
That's a great one. I'm not familiar with that app, although I am Catholic. But I will look it up.
Look it up, yeah.
On my ride home.
Yeah, they get a lot of famous people. Mark Wahlberg, he's an investor, and he's on that. So
yeah.
A couple.
Me, Henry Ford. I know he's not alive, but Henry Ford.
He was a Nazi lover.
He had a lot of problems. He was an irascible guy too. He made decisions that you get any color you want as long as it's the color I picked. But nevertheless, he created a style of manufacturing that changed everything for us. I think it would be fascinating to talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had a very obvious Henry Ford in the United States in terms of just a manufacturing genius, because we need it. I mean, China has a lot of Henry Fords now, but I feel like U.S. manufacturing has lagged since the golden era of early 1900s.
I think the ingenuity is there, and I think the drive is there, and this reindustrialization push that we've got going in the U.S., I believe deeply is going to succeed. We've just got to get the right incentives into place and make sure we remove the barriers where we can and get the incentives into place. But I'm confident there's more than one Henry Ford out there. We just got to set the conditions for that flower to bloom.
I hope so. We'll have the last two questions, and okay. I kind of want to do this until you. I'm
going to go until I get a gross return.
Yeah. Okay. Last two questions. So, who spun last? I can't remember this. Anyways, we'll just spin for both of us because we're both answering the questions. What's going on here? This is I guess this is appropriate. I bring you on to my show, try to get you to eat something disgusting, and sure enough, I'm the one that's eating this. Okay, let's see how the luck goes. The 50-50 shot right now. Licorice or burnt rubber? Oh, this is a bad one. Burnt rubber is not fun to chew on.
You got licorice, otherwise you'd be gagging.
Licorice. I'm good. I'm feeling good.
Good move.
Okay, here you go. Last one. This is the last one. Look
Blue.
at you. You should be doing Russian roulette. I mean, you've got a. Okay, blue.
I think we've asked all these.
Okay, we've asked all of them. Why don't you look at this list? Your last question. You pick a question that you want to answer.
Okay, let's have fun. What's one military piece of equipment you love?
I'm going to say two, because they basically go hand in hand. 550 cord and 100-mile-an-hour tape. I'll take that anyway.
Those are good. You win.
You
win. I was going to drop the M1911 and then maybe an A10 or something like that. But yeah, you're right. Absolutely. If I could only take one thing with me to a desert island, an airplane flight, or a picnic, it would be a roll of duct tape and a little bit of 550 cord.
Okay. Well, that's a great piece of advice for our civilian friends that are listening. Thank you so much for coming on, Chris.
Thanks, Boots.
This means a lot to have you here. I've got tremendous respect for you as a leader. Thank you for your service to our country over all those years. And I'm really excited that your service for our country is still continuing on the private sector.
I feel lucky.
I wish you all of the luck and all the best over at Valor Equity, and I hope you guys are enormously successful in your mission.
Thanks, Boots. You've said an awful lot of nice things about me in the last hour, but it's my turn. You're obviously a spectacular human being, as those around you know. But if you reach back 20 years in your memory, you were a fantastic combat leader. You're brave, trusted by your subordinates, and unwavering in your desire to get the right thing done under really trying circumstances, most of which you will be surprised to know that I remember. But I remember every one of them, and I remember you standing out as a paragon of military skill and personal virtue. And I was lucky to get to know you then, and I'm lucky to live near you again now.
Well, that is probably the kindest thing I've ever heard said, so I really appreciate it. It's always fun to connect in Manhattan in finance with your old combat officer buddy, commander. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great.
Really appreciate it. I can't believe you didn't get one of these.
I'll do one.
No, you don't. No, you're good. And that's it for this episode of Boots on the Ground. If you enjoyed it, please follow and read the show notes. Reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only and isn't investment advice. RRA Capital and its affiliates may have interests related to topics discussed, and views are as of the recording date. See show notes for full disclosure. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.